All right, I believe we are ready to go. Hello and welcome to the ongoing Spectra webinar series brought to you today by Spectra and IDC. I'm Bob Cohn and I'll be serving as our moderator today. The title of today's talk is Eliminating the Problems of Exponential Data Growth Forever. Now, I've got to admit, that's a tall order, but I think our speakers today will be able to deliver an interesting approach to doing just that. Our first speaker is Research Director at IDC, covering data protection and recovery, Mr. Robert Amatruda. Recognized as a leader in the storage market, you may have already heard one of Robert's keynote speeches at various trade events, or at the very least read one of his many opinion pieces in industry trade publications. Following Robert will be Spectra's very own Mr. Bruce Kornfeld. With more than 20 years of experience as an executive in the enterprise computing industry, we're excited to have Bruce serving as Interim Chief Marketing Officer for Spectra. Bruce was instrumental in Spectra's recent introduction of some very exciting technology, and I'm sure he'll touch on that in addition to other aspects of Spectra's response to an ever-changing and developing industry. I'll be collecting any questions you may have as the webinar progresses. Please use the chat box to submit questions that come to mind, and we'll ask Robert and Bruce to address those at the end of the webinar. With that being said, I'll turn it over to Mr. Amatruda. Robert, are you with us?
I am indeed. Bob, thank you very much for the welcome and the introduction. Today's topic that I will talk about is really the challenges of managing and protecting exponential data growth. And with that, as we advance to the next slide, I'll share with you some of the customer insights that we have been hearing time and time again. Increasingly, customers that we talk to are managing not only their information, but their infrastructure. And in addition to that, we're finding that more and more their data is geo-dispersed, and they really need the ability to have flexible and agile infrastructure and the ability to scale their infrastructure very quickly and cost-effectively. In addition to that, we see a rapid run-up in unstructured data growth, really as a result of what we call the four pillars: mobility, social media, big data, and increasingly cloud adoption. Now, that's not an exhaustive list that we see out there, but those are really what IDC calls the four pillars of data growth, particularly unstructured data growth. So as we see that run-up in unstructured data, it really has implications on the data protection and recovery landscape. Increasingly, more and more organizations are virtualizing. They're adopting storage optimization technologies like data dedupe and the like. In addition to that, they really need to be mindful of recovery time and recovery point objectives. And as they do that, our research shows that they're using more and more disk and replication strategies to really manage that explosion of data. So if you look at this graphic in the upper left, you can see that IDC is really anticipating significant growth in mobile devices, really 3x by 2015. There's really no slowdown. I myself manage no less than three mobile devices. My colleagues, some of whom manage more than 5 or 6. So we see it playing out right in front of us. In addition to that, we all know that the era of virtualization is upon us. And we see the level of virtualization in some environments is really exceeded 60%. From what our research shows, but we really see more and more growth around virtual machine adoption. In addition to that, the number of users, particularly at the endpoints, continues to increase at a rapid pace. We expect double the amount of users by 2015. And of course, the incessant data growth. As you can see, it's really double or triple the growth rate of all of those other components that we've talked through. And it has true implications for customer infrastructure in terms of the way they plan and acquire new technology to manage both data and infrastructure. So let me talk you through the evolution of the data landscape. With all of those macro trends that I just talked through, we're finding that more and more of the data out there is really geodispersed or decentralized. And this really has implications for how customers not only manage the data, but really the workloads that fall behind them. We're seeing that the workloads need to be geodispersed along with the data. And with that, the workloads are really gaining location awareness. Again, driven by those four pillars, as we call them, in the marketplace: social media, big data, and increasingly cloud usage, is really driving up that capture of unstructured data. And also, to be complete, we're seeing what we call machine-generated data is really unstructured as well. And that would include things like video capture, video in parking lots, videos in shopping malls, convenience stores. So more and more of that data that's captured by machines, sensors, is also largely unstructured data and really has implications in terms of management. So when we look at the implications, we really see the rapid run-up in capacity optimized storage. As you can see in the graphic on the right-hand side, what we've done here is we've broken out our capacity forecast, our overall capacity forecast based on capacity optimized storage and performance optimized storage. Capacity optimized storage is really that class of storage that deals with unstructured data. And you can see at the end of the forecast period, by 2017, almost 8% of the storage capacity growth will remain in that capacity optimized area. We also anticipate spending increasing at a very heavy clip, 16.2% compounded annually. And really it's driven by object-based storage platforms that really continue to power the cloud, and also all of the storage as a service solutions. So I'm sharing here with you a data point that we pulled from a survey late last year. When we asked organizations really about their unstructured or file-based data split, really by use cases. And if you start at the top, you see in the light blue bar the 2012 data. The dark blue bars are 2013 data. You really see that the top use cases, at least when we go back to 2012, you see that over a third of the use case was really around file and print services or network shares. Now fast forward to 2013 to the dark bar, you see that file and print and network shares has dramatically been reduced. However, when you look at the other top use cases there, backup and recovery and archive are extremely prominent. And really the takeaway here is that the change, if you will, between 2013 and 2012 remains very consistent between backup, recovery, and archive. However, with file and print services or network shares, you've seen quite a bit of contraction in terms of the use case, particularly for that file-based or unstructured data. Now, that really has significant implications for the protection and recovery marketplace. And what I really want to do is walk you through kind of the epics or the eras that we've been through, we're in today, and what we're seeing in the future. So focus on the left-hand side of the slide. Really, let me talk you through the drivers of protection and recovery that we've already been through. So in terms of protection and recovery, it's really been backup driven. In terms of the function, and again, I don't want to denigrate anybody who is really involved in that backup process, but it's really been back office workers, back office emphasis, if you will. It's largely been structured data. Much of that data resides in the data center, and it really is been about data only. Managing hundreds of gigabytes, we've seen the initial SANs come onto the scene, and it's really been performance driven, so really speeds and feeds. However, the era that we're in today, we see a multitude of options being used out there. We do see backup, archive, and replication melding together in terms of strategies being used for not only backup, but the ability to safeguard and move that data to secondary locations and also archive it for long periods of time as the retention periods for some of those data sets, particularly unstructured data sets, continue to increase. There's been much more emphasis in C-level executive focus on the protection and recovery process. And I've talked through this already a great deal. We see really the notion around this unstructured data increasing in terms of capacity and use and awareness. More of that data is created at the edges. And really it is about data and images, particularly when you talked about virtualization. The capacity that is under management has exploded. And we hear this time and time again from customers and surveys that we do. And we see multiple approaches being employed here, not only on-premise but cloud. And we're really in this era of consolidation. So given that, when we really look out to the future, we continue to see cloud-based adoption models gaining velocity, really driving as-a-service storage models. It really is about objects and endpoints, really about convergence, and my colleagues talk very passionately about converged infrastructure and the ability to move data and images across compute and storage infrastructure. And the capacity, despite all the storage optimization that's been in use today, continues to grow at great lengths. And we talk about reuse freedom, not only data, but really the ability to port and reuse images. And increasingly we really see the management layer being more and more important. So when we look at what's driven the changes in terms of factors that are really driving that transformation there, again, I'm going to talk you through the past and what we're seeing today. So clearly the era of virtualization is maturing in some ways, and if not well upon us. And it's really about managing images and data together. And in terms of cloud use and adoption, we see storage really it's more and more about recovery to and from the cloud. Really that data growth continues despite all of the storage efficiency technology that's been put into play and in use today. Increasingly, it is about recovery, and we're seeing more and more use of things like snapshot copies and replication, and it really is about increased retrieval time and the ability to have a wrapper put around that data, if you will, more indexing, more cataloging, and other technology that will enhance that retrieval process. And with that, we really see disk as a transformative technology. More and more it's being used today as a way to resurrect data that's needed in very aggressive time periods. So in terms of the factors that we see will drive future transformation out there, it really is about that control plane, really about the ability to understand and move the data in terms of from a data store to the cloud, on-premise, off-premise. We really see more and more use of what we call copy data, or the ability to really reuse that data in the native format. We see increasingly more flash and SSD storage being integrated into those converged systems, really for performance and the ability to resurrect that data when it's needed, how it's needed. We see more and more growth around what we call scale-out architectures. Again, the story about consolidation is very consistent and pervasive in the marketplace. It really is about images and objects, and really that ability to recover to and from the cloud. So with that, that concludes my portion of the presentation today, and I know we're going to stoke up some questions as well. And I will turn it over to SpectraLogic, who have truly been innovators in the data storage and data protection and recovery marketplace. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Robert. Very good introduction to what I think all of us are dealing with in the market today. And next up we have Mr. Bruce Kornfeld to maybe give a couple of ideas on how Spectra has responded to such challenges. Bruce, are you with us?
I am. Can you hear me okay?
Loud and clear.
All right, great. Well, thanks very much, Bob for the intro. My name is Bruce Kornfeld, and as Bob Cohn said, I'm glad to be involved with Spectra. I've been in and around the storage industry, I'm almost embarrassed to say, since the early 1990s. So the changes that I've seen in the disk market in particular, and tape, have been dramatic, and I think the thing that catches me the most is that chart that Bob showed, which I'm going to talk about here, is the growth of what all the analysts call unstructured data, and I think IT people generally think of it as files, right? The growth of just plain old files, and that's the thing that's changed over the last 5-10 years, and that's exactly what Spectra is all about, trying to help customers like yourselves figure out how do you manage this data in a way that's the most cost-effective and easy. So we're going to talk about two different technologies that we have that are similar but different, and let's get right to it. So let me see here. So just to kind of recap what Bob from IDC was just saying, typically what I like to say is, we love the analyst community. They are usually right, but not always right. But the things that they see and do take a broad brush at the market. So they see kind of a bird's eye view as to what's going on. They do research. They talk to end users. So they have got generally a good idea of what's happened and what might happen in the future. And the things that they're predicting are pretty straightforward, which is the growth of unstructured data or files is going to continue. And by the way, it's most of what you're probably managing today. So I'd be willing to bet for the IT community on this call right now that you can all think about the amount of data you have in your environment, and I bet that maybe you're not 70 to 80%, but you're somewhere north of 50% of your total storage are just files that need to be managed versus online transaction processing databases, right? So I'm willing to also bet that there's no one on this call right now who the only thing they manage from a storage perspective is an airline reservation system that just can never go down, right? I mean, clearly some of you may have that as part of what you do, right? Highly available transactive storage systems, but what I find from talking to customers is that's usually a piece of what you do, but a bigger piece in terms of the amount of storage are unstructured data and files. And back in the day, the big growth engine was the structured data, and the files weren't that important, but now it's the other way around. And this is exactly why what we do, what SpectraLogic does in helping you store these files in a very cost-effective way is becoming more and more important. Bob talked about what's driving all this data growth. You can see them there on the slide. But frankly, the thought that social media, audio files, and video files would be something that corporate America would have to deal with, you would think that wouldn't be the case, but it absolutely is, right? Marketing teams are using videos and audio to promote products. It's become part of what we do. So I can clearly see, everyone can clearly see what's driving the growth. Now the question is, how can we help you manage all of it? So the two things I want to talk about today, one of them is a disk system that we offer, and the other one is an innovative way to move data to tape. We don't have some interactiveness here on the call, so it's hard for me to ask questions, and I certainly can't look you in the eye, but I'd be willing to bet that there's some of you out there that are using tape and thinking, why do I need it? Or some of you that aren't using it anymore, and potentially those could be mistakes, and that's what we want to kind of bring to the table today, is show you a new way, an easy way for you to leverage the cost effectiveness of tape systems. So that'll be the second product. All right. So the first one, getting to the disk piece first, N-Tier Verde is our flagship disk product. That's our fourth generation disk system that we've been shipping, and simply put, it is simply affordable file storage. It's designed to help you store files in a very cost-effective way without requiring a lot of administration. So as a matter of fact, the way it's designed is that the person using this system doesn't need any previous storage experience. We've architected in such a way that a general IT person can manage it absolutely without any coursework or classes or studying. The second thing about it is half the cost of traditional file storage. So think about how you're storing file data today. Think about what you pay to whatever the big company name is that you use. And what we're offering here is at least half, usually a lot less than that, of what you're paying today for file storage. And it's also a very reliable system. And we're going to talk about all three of these in some detail coming up right now. So as far as ease of use and no previous storage experience required, the system is a scalable disk system, and I'll go through some of the specs here at the end. But it's a scalable disk system. Start small, grow large, add disks when you need to, and it truly doesn't require knowledge of what a storage system, how a storage system works, and all that kind of stuff. It's simply designed so that from the time you power it on, after it's racked, powered, and cabled, from the time you power on to when you're writing data is less than 10 minutes, and that's for the average user. We've designed it in such a way that there's advanced capabilities built in, but the user doesn't have to think about them. So yes, you have to create a disk pool, and yes, you have to create a volume, and choose a RAID level, but that's about it. That's all you really need to do, and then you're up and running. As a matter of fact, I've been around the storage industry a long time, so I'm probably not the average user, but I grabbed the user interface a few weeks ago without having seen it before, and as a marketing person, within 3 minutes I had the thing configured and writing data. So it's very, very simple. We've designed it so the user interface is intuitive. There is a lot of monitoring and reporting capabilities. Those of you that are used to kind of enterprise-class disk systems probably have some of the reporting and monitoring that you really like. We think that we've incorporated the key things that you really need in terms of getting status of the hardware and the volumes, the ability to call home, alerts. So all the basic monitoring and reporting that you would hope would be in a disk system is absolutely there. As far as cost goes, this is a system that's designed by Spectra, built by Spectra Logic, and we have a lot of control over the hardware and software, so we're able to deliver a system very, very cost effectively. We are using enterprise SAS capacity drives, so reliability is absolutely there, but we're still able to offer a significant cost reduction to what you might be paying today. And you can see the chart in the lower right here about kind of industry averages, and we can all argue how accurate these are, but there's purposely ranges there because everyone's different and negotiating and street price versus list and all that stuff. But in general, an enterprise class disk subsystem is in the $5 to $16 a gig range. Full redundancy, lots of controllers, all that kind of stuff. A mid-range disk system, which is characterized by redundant disk controllers and scalable drives, is in the $1 to $6 a gig range. And when it says economy disk, that's typically JBOD. That's typically just get an enclosure, power supply, fans, and some hard drives, and that's in the sub 50 cents a gig range, and that's pretty much where we're priced, right? So depending on how much you buy and all that kind of stuff, but in general, the price of an N-tier Verde is approximately 50 cents a gigabyte. So you're getting reliable, easy-to-use, scalable storage at the price of simple JBODs. And that simply put is because we've optimized this for file storage. We're not trying to say, go run your Oracle database on this because it's running your retail system. That's not what this is for. This is for really reliable, low-cost file storage. Just to mention what those other bullets are, price lock is a SpectraLogic term that when we enter an agreement with the customer on support pricing, we guarantee that the maintenance pricing will not increase over time, because that is one of the tricks that our competitors pull to get you in the door is a great low price up front, great first-year maintenance, and then lo and behold, the next year everything goes up. So we're big believers in locking all of us down to a consistent annual maintenance fee that doesn't go up, or at least I should say it goes up at the most with the rate of inflation. That's what we say. And then compression. This disk system is capable of doing compression. So if your data is compressible, the dollar per gig actually would go down. All right, and let's talk about reliability. So, of course, it's designed with all of the hardware redundancy that you'd imagine, the redundant fans, redundant power, cabling, all that kind of stuff. And the hardware we're using is built by us. Obviously, there are some, we're not manufacturing DRAM or processors, so there's clearly, we OEM some pieces of it, but it is manufactured by us, and we do burn-in. So we make sure that when a system arrives at your location, you're not turning it on for the first time and getting any components that have any infant mortality. I was told that's not a politically correct term, but maybe it's not so bad. Infant mortality of components, we'll get that out of the way for you. So it's a very reliable system from a hardware perspective. And those of you that have been around and know, controllers, processor chips, memory, that's usually not the stuff that fails in a system, right? Power supply will fail, and those are redundant, etc. On the software side, we've got some really innovative software that we've built, and we offer lots of RAID options. You can have a single drive redundancy, so like a typical RAID 1 or with RAID 5, there's still one drive parity, but we have the ability to do two drive parities or even three. So our system, you can optionally choose this to say, I'd like a system that can sustain three drive failures in a RAID group. So we've designed the software to be extra reliable to make sure to maintain your uptime. The RAID write hole issue, let me just address that straight on. That's basically that says data can get lost in a disk subsystem if there's a power outage before the data is destaged from cache. And I'll just hit it straight up. We do not have front-end cache in this system. And I'll pause so you can think about that. That's not typical for RAID systems. The reason is it's not designed for OLTP. And for small blocks, high transaction systems, front-end cache, write-back cache is important because it can speed up your application. But if you're just writing files, and in particular big files, cache is really a waste of money, and it also adds some complexity, and it creates this potential issue where if you have a power outage and data doesn't destage from cache fast enough. So we've eliminated that kind of stuff, right? We built a system designed for really robust, reliable file storage. Okay, I'm going to keep going. You guys can pop questions in the question box that we can address at the end. So here are the specs of what the product looks like. There's two versions, a baby bear and a papa bear kind of thing. So for those of you that are looking for just a little bit of storage, on the 2U version, we can go up to 220 terabytes. On the bigger version that starts with a 4U controller and 10 drives, that system can expand up to 1.7 petabytes. The thing I didn't mention clearly up front is the front-end access to the product is file systems, NFS or CIFS. So simply put, another term you'll hear in the industry is NAS, right? So this is a NAS box that talks NFS or CIFS out to the outside world, and on the back end, we're doing RAID and block processing. All right. I suppose I'm going to keep going. We can save all the questions for the end. Again, I believe all you need to do is pose a question, and we'll prioritize them and answer as many as we can. So to move to the other product I was talking about, it's called Black Pearl is the name of the product. And what we've done here, those of you that know us, we've been around for 30 years. We're known for very reliable, very scalable tape libraries. That's what we do. That's our core business. And that's what we're going to continue to do. Over the years, a lot of you have started using tape instead of just for backup to do more of an archive, because data sets are getting so large that restoring from tape can be really, really hard. So that's where a lot of you have moved to disk and dedupe disk products for your backups, etc. But the archiving to tape market has continued to grow. And what we're doing with Black Pearl is it's a new innovative way for you to get data to tape in a very simple fashion. We've eliminated all of the tape management knowledge that you need to have to manage tape. So we've built an appliance. We call it a Black Pearl appliance that you can see right there. And it's designed to store massive data forever at virtually no cost. Massive data forever at virtually no cost. This is not designed for small files. This is designed for big kahuna files or big kahuna directories with lots of files in them, right? So this is where if you've got a user directory that's storing the marketing department's promotional videos that haven't been used in 6 months and it's a terabyte of data, we want you to be able to move that whole directory out to tape. And if you ever need it back, you can absolutely get it back, but we're going to make it really easy to move that big chunk of data out to tape and not think about it for a while. If you need it back, you're not going to get it back in a millisecond or 3 seconds. It'll probably take a minute or 2 or 3. But for data that hasn't been used in a while and it's a big chunk of data, we get feedback from customers all the time that that's what they're fine with that, because as everyone probably knows, the cost of tape is significantly less than disk. As a matter of fact, I forgot to point that out when we were on that slide back, and I won't go backwards, but I have a separate version. It shows automated tape library dollar per gig is in the 5 cents to $1 a gig, right? So tape, everyone knows, is really inexpensive. It's just sometimes the software required to get data to tape makes it complicated and expensive, or sometimes the perception is tape's hard to manage, and we've eliminated all of that stuff with Black Pearl. So with Black Pearl, we've created an appliance that creates an environment where you get the absolute lowest cost way to store data. We've designed it so that it's easy and simple to move bulk data to tape, and it is the most scalable long-term storage available. So I'm going to talk about each of those in a little bit of detail here. So from a cost perspective, everyone can throw different numbers, but even including the cost of the appliance, you're looking at somewhere around 10 cents a gigabyte, flat out, right? Including the tape system behind it and the appliance. But you can start storing these terabytes of data that you have sitting around, and petabytes, and even exabytes. We have systems that can store up to 3.3 exabytes of data, and you can do it at about 10 cents a gig. And that's significantly less than what you're paying for disk right now. And I bet there's a lot of you on the phone that have these large data sets spinning on expensive disk drives. So just think about the concept of what your budget would look like if you can use a new way to get data off of those expensive disk systems, throw them out to tape, still be able to manage them and retrieve them, But now you've got your expensive disk systems freed up, so you're not buying as much of that stuff either, right? So there's a win-win here, lower cost of storing the massive data, and you're delaying significantly the purchase of your enterprise class disk on the front end, which, as everyone knows, can be the $3 to $10 a gig kind of price points. One thing I did not mention about the appliance, and we'll get to it again later, but while I'm thinking of it, the appliance itself is a 2U server that has 4 SSD drives in it. So we've come up with an innovative way so that when you send these big chunks of data to the Black Pearl, we've eliminated the performance bottlenecks that sometimes people can think of with tape, especially if you have multiple systems trying to write to the library at the same time. So really the SSD drives are a big fat cache in front of the tape library so that we eliminate some of the performance bottlenecks that could occur. All right, so let's talk about it a little bit. What do we mean by the easiest way to move bulk data? So what we've done is we've created a new interface. I'd like to say it's industry standard, but it's not, but maybe someday it will be. But it's modeled off of Amazon's S3, the Simple Storage Solution, I believe it stands for, something like that. Amazon's S3 interface, which is a RESTful interface. Which, either the people on the phone know what REST is and use it, or I'm sure there's people within your company that are comfortable programming with REST language. It's a very simple way, an industry standard way to move data around the internet. What we've done is we've taken the S3 protocol and we've added some commands to make it able to handle tape. So that we've had to add 4 different commands that handle bulk data and handle the sequentialness of how tape works. So it's really just 4 extra commands added to the S3 industry standard API. We call it DS3 for deep storage. D is for deep. And let's see, I forget, Bob. How do I go forward? I guess it doesn't matter. Never mind. So DS3 is the interface. And what that means is if your clients, if the servers or client systems that want to send data to the Black Pearl, as long as they can speak this DS3 language, which will help you either write some scripts, or there are some clients that we're developing, client software that you can use, or we'll work with you to develop your own client. There is some software work that has to be done on the client side. That's why you see client software there. But as long as you can speak the DS3 language, you can very quickly start sending these big bulk data to tape. But all you have to know is the REST command, which basically says put this big file or this big directory or this big object, however you want to think of it, put it to tape. Or put it to Black Pearl, I should say, and then we do the rest. And that's where you don't have to have operators thinking about tape drives and cartridges and how do I maximize the writes so I don't get tape thrashing and all that complicated tape stuff. We do that for you inside of Black Pearl, and that's what it's designed for. So we're eliminating all of the complexity that you might think of, making it really, really simple, and all you have to do is say, write this big chunk of data to Black Pearl, and we're going to use our SSD cache. We're going to concatenate the different streams. We're going to figure out which tape drive to write it to, and we're going to make it really, really efficient on the back end. All right, I'm going to keep going here to save some time. And then as far as scalability goes, our libraries scale from terabyte size to exabyte size. So no matter where you start, you can absolutely scale libraries with us. Those of you that are familiar with the tape industry, we're using LTFS as the protocol that we're using to write to the tapes. So that is an industry standard method. So you can take tapes that we've written and you can read them in any other software package that understands LTFS, which my understanding is most of the majors do have the capability to read LTFS tapes. So you're not locked into Spectra forever in terms of the tape format. And the other thing is we have this thing about keeping data forever. The way we're able to do that is those of you that know tape well, 30-year shelf life is what people say a tape cartridge typically has. But then you have the issue around, data formats change and LTO6 goes to LTO9 in the future, et cetera. Well, because we have this appliance in front of us, we now have have a way to do media migration. So you can, in our library over time, you can add the next generation tape drive, and as a background activity, will automatically migrate from an LTO-6 cartridge to an LTO-12 cartridge someday in the future. So that's what we mean by keeping data forever. You can literally just keep data in our library, and we'll make sure it stays intact, we'll make sure it's readable, and we can move it between formats over time. So that was my run for the roses through N-Tier Verde and Black Pearl. I think I covered the basics of both of those products, and I'll just kind of summarize by saying no matter what your storage requirements are, as long as they're involved with storing massive amounts of data, we feel very strongly that we have a great solution for you that is really, really low cost and really, really easy to use. So with that, Bob, is it really clear to the attendees on how to ask a question? I'm not sure. Maybe you want to remind them, or?
Yes, it should be, and we've already gotten a few written in, but again, you'll see a chat box on the left side of your screen. You can just type a question in there. I'll grab it and pose it over to either Robert Amatruda or Bruce Kornfeld. And it looks like we've gotten a few already in and a couple more coming in. Let me start with one of the first ones, and I think this is for Mr. Amatruda. It's something that I believe Bruce touched on as he started speaking later, but it says, how much do you see social media impacting data center operations? And that came in when you were talking about the different data creation devices that we're adding to this exponential data growth. Robert, do you have any comments on that?
Sure. So again, I will try to tie it back to. Thank you, Bob, by the way. But I'll tie it back to the question, really, to what we're experiencing here at IDC. When we're talking about social media, it really is. It's inclusive of things like Facebook, but increasingly it's about Twitter. It's about other forms of consumption of rich media content. So it could be things like video clips, for instance, are getting much more common as a way for the analyst community to deliver content. So if you really look at the infrastructure that one needs to support those activities, IDC has been reviewing and re-architecting much of its processes and capture capabilities to really take advantage of this growing segment around social in rich media. So it would be inclusive of things like Twitter and Facebook. IDC has its own Facebook page. So I think more and more companies will continue to grapple with this explosive growth of social media, largely unstructured data. There's just no doubt about it.
Very interesting. So it's I guess almost fair to say then it's the way individuals, just normal citizens, are working with information around the world that's starting to impact how corporations are having to work with data and store data. Is that a pretty fair assessment?
Very succinctly put. It's really. We talk a lot about the consumerization of IT, and clearly that's one of the trends that's really starting to play out on a larger scale in corporate basis. But very well put.
Okay, very good. One looks like more of a comment and then a question that kind of is along the same lines. The comment was, we're currently challenged by the amount of data we have to put in the cloud. It doesn't seem viable. And then I got another question in reference to the cloud when you were presenting early on in reference to security and compliance or even performance issues with large data sets in the cloud. So kind of wrapping those into one, would you make a comment about that, Robert?
Yeah, let me make a comment in some observations. So, data movement into the cloud, I think will continually be a challenge. I know I did a speaking event recently to a large group of end users, and really the questions that were posed to me was not even about movement of data, but how do you evaluate a cloud vendor that will really remain viable? I think the example of Nurbonics, pulling the plug on their cloud and leaving people, many of those end user customers having to try to migrate that data, back onto their premises. It was a huge heartache and problem. And then in terms of that's one issue, is really staying power of a cloud provider, and then the other is really around the mechanics of how do you really migrate and move that data on and off premises, and it has serious implications for archive and compliance, particularly in some of the vertical industries around medical and what we call scientific, which could be a catch-all with things like genomics, things like medical devices. All of that data is obviously unstructured. It's growing. It has to be managed. Some of it has to be managed off-site. And here's really where we see the value proposition of a solution set that Spectra has, being able to easily capture that data on a very low-cost medium and really maybe even alleviate some of the need to migrate those data volumes off to the cloud. And again, I'll go back to the discussions I've had with some of the end users. And I talk about more C-level scrutiny. The people who manage the data sets and the backup and recovery process are being asked increasingly to drive down their CapEx costs, and cloud is really seen as a way to do that at first pass. But I think the devil is always in the details here.
Okay.
So I hope I answered that.
Hey, Bob Cohen, or both Bobs, is it okay if I jump in on the cloud piece?
Yeah, and actually, Bruce, let me pose a question to you as you do that just came in, but I'm going to jump out of order and take it. It says you did not present the Black Pearl unit as a private cloud. Is that what you're suggesting? So
Yeah.
that might play into that as well.
Yeah, exactly. So that's exactly what I was doing. And I was
Okay,
kind of,
great.
I was kind of rushing a little bit through to save time. But yeah, the cloud piece is something I didn't talk about, and let me just address it. So really, there's one use case that we think will be really good for service providers that want to build a big service offering to people to store data over the internet to their cloud. And this is a really low-cost way for a public cloud provider to offer to end users a very low-cost service offering. However, I think it was Bob that made a comment up front about the cost of that, and it can be hard to send large data sets from your data center to the cloud. I think some people are using it for small data sets. There's also the recent collapse of the one service provider where everyone that had to find another home for their data, it was a big scramble. So there are some issues with using public cloud storage. But this would be a good solution for a cloud provider to build. But secondly, to be more direct about the question about private clouds, this is exactly what this is for. So it's a way for an IT department to build their own private cloud set for this massive way to archive data and do it on premise and do it in a way that is really, really low cost, right? The 10 cent per gigabyte range. So you can build it. We'll help you do it. Obviously, we're going to install the libraries and the Black Pearls and all that kind of stuff. All you need to do is figure out your workflow. In what data do you want to move to this private cloud storage farm that you're going to build based on Black Pearl and SpectraLogic tape libraries? So yeah, this is exactly what the use case is for.
Okay, great. Now I'm going to jump back into what I think came in around the middle of the presentation, and it says, can you tell us the performance of Verde? So that would be the Intier Verde box that was presented as a first solution.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm not a big fan. Again, I've been in the storage world a long time, and I think specmanship is very misleading. So, is it 300 megabytes a second or 900 megabytes a second? I mean, all of that is your mileage may vary. So it's very hard to quote performance over the phone. But what I will say is this: is that the way that we've designed Verde is such that it's designed for moving files, and in particular, big files. Because like I said, we purposely do not have front-end cache on the system. We wanted to keep it simple. We didn't want to have the extra complex software needed to do write-back caching and destaging and all the risk about power outages. We kept it really simple, and we designed it for users that have files, and in particular, big files that need to be stored in a very low-cost way. So what we found from the customers using it so far, they're pleasantly surprised at the performance for doing sequential writes. So if you have an environment for sequential writes, that's exactly what this is for, moving big chunks of data to disk. So the performance in that regard is excellent. I would say if you're going to try to use a Verde, like we said, for an online database processing, potentially you're not going to be happy because that's not what this is designed for. It's not designed for small blocks and highly transactive business, and that's where you want a system that has a nice front-end cache.
Okay, got it. And that leads into another question. And Bruce, I know we've seen a lot of these units being used in just the standard backup applications where people are backing up tremendous number of very small files, but I take it the applications are packaging those files into large amounts of data that are being written over. In reference to that, in the backup world, could you, a question came in or a comment, can you speak to compression and deduplication?
Yeah, so this Verde would be an excellent target for any of your backup applications, right? So as long as they support SIPs and NFS, which in my understanding is they all do, or at least most of them do. So Verde could be your target location for sending backup data. At that point, it's the software's job to send the files, the backup files, to Verde. And that's where typically, there's this debate in the industry is where should data be deduped. So, we don't need to get into that here, but clearly a very prominent way to do deduplication is to do it at the source. And my personal opinion is that's a better way to do it because, you're doing it before you send it over the wire. So the way that it would work is you would use your backup app, turn the dedupe capability on, and only send Verde the deduped backup files. So that's a perfect use case for using a Verde. The second one about compression is that we do our file system internal to Verde does have the capability to do compression. So if your data is compressible, you could very well get even more bang for your buck within the Verde. So we can do compression, and you should enable deduplication at the source if you're using Verde in a backup environment.
Okay, great. And time for about one more question. I'm not sure which product this might have related to, but it says, is data written as an object or as a file?
Yeah, so clearly for Verde, we're talking about files. So Verde is designed so it can plop into any existing environment as long as it's a file system. As long as you're writing SIPs in a Windows environment, NFS in a more Unix or Linux-like environment, it looks like a big file store. So that's really easy. Everyone knows how to do it. No programming required. So Verde is clearly designed for files. Whereas Black Pearl, it's really designed for objects. So the DS3 protocol that we've written is expecting you to have objects to send to us. And an object can be as simple as just a collection of files. As a matter of fact, we have a user interface that we've created for Black Pearl that really just looks like a Windows Explorer kind of interface, and it allows you to tell us which files and which directories you'd like us to create into an object. So you don't have to be object storage experts. You don't have to be using an object store somewhere else. We will help you do it. But the reason for objects is that when you're talking about sending massive amounts of data to tape, you don't want to send 2 megabyte files occasionally. You want to send, hundreds of gigabytes and terabyte size objects, because that's what it's designed for. It's designed for storing large amounts of data, not small.
Okay, fantastic. We are getting close to the top of the hour, so we will take a wrap with that. I want to thank, again, Robert Amatruda for joining us. I want to thank Bruce Kornfeld for joining us. Great conversation, a lot to decipher as we all walk away, and thanks to all the participants who joined as well. Take care, everyone, and we'll see you on the next Spectra webinar series.